Greetings and welcome to Raising Resilient Minds. I'm your host, Dr. Jihan, board certified pediatrician. And today I'm excited to have as a guest, Dr. Vlad is a board certified pediatrician as well with extensive experience in developmental care, particularly with a focus in autism. He's based in Staten Island, New York, and he actually operates a direct primary care pediatric practice where he provides personalized holistic care to children with special needs. His approach emphasizes a supportive partnership with families, incorporating the 6 pillars of health: sleep, nutrition, physical activity, relationships, coping skills, and environmental management. Welcome, Dr. Vlad.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Here at Raising Resilient Minds, we are really trying to help parents understand how they can make sure that their children have the best opportunity in life. And I love that you're working with the special needs population because often it's a little bit more challenging to actually assist those families and help them navigate this space. So if you don't mind, can you tell me a little bit about what you actually do firsthand in your practice?
A little bit more challenging is quite an understatement. But yes, there is significant challenges that we see with children who have special needs, particularly children with autism. I'm just being silly there. So the things that we do differently at our practice is basically try to understand a child as a whole person. So one thing that I help families to focus on is automatic assumption when you receive an autism diagnosis for a child is to think about all the things that they have trouble with, the disability component of autism. But in reality, autism is similar to the nature of the universe, which is everything is at the same time a particle and a wave. So just as the universe can have duality and have two things at once, with autism, there is the disability and the challenging components of it, as well as the unique gifts and the magic of it. You think about people like Albert Einstein, like Elon Musk, like Temple Grandin, who have contributed tremendously to our society and our way of life. So I try to emphasize those two aspects. And in order to help children reach their potential, I talk about how we have to help them pave the way for them from both their physical health as well as their emotional health, their mental health, and all the pillars of health that we mentioned before.
Yes, and I love that you touch on those because in my practice, as well as on the podcast, we often discuss the importance of holistic approach to children. And we can't just see a tantrum as just a tantrum, right? You have to get to the root cause of what might be causing these tantrums or the aggression that we often see in children, especially those who are nonverbal. And I always explain to parents, imagine if you couldn't communicate. You don't know how to sign. It's not coming out. You have the words, but they're not coming out. Just imagine how frustrated and upset you would get when you just wanted the red doll or whatever, and they keep giving you the brown one or whatever might be the case. And it just, you don't have difficulty already with your emotional regulation. And then it's just that one thing. You're like, no one ever understands me. No one hears what I'm saying. And then it turns into this meltdown or this tantrum as we've had these buildup of emotions. And so what is one of your approaches to just helping parents better understand some of the behaviors that we do see in children who are on this autism spectrum?
It would probably take me several hours to go through some of the examples of different behaviors.
Just one example. Yeah.
But we can do one in particular. Absolutely. Let's think. A behavior such as, here's a great story. So a child who is engaging in maladaptive behavior, like for example, there was one family that comes to mind where they would go out for family walks, right, with their child. So the mom was there, the dad was there, and the child was there together. It was a 10-year-old child. And every time they would go out for these family walks, the child would misbehave and would purposely step on the neighbor's lawns or on neighbor's flowers and causing the parents to scold the child or make the walk not enjoyable at all. So just as you were mentioning, kids can be very frustrated when they can't express what they're thinking or what they're feeling. So when it comes to behaviors, this is the universal language. Like anyone who cannot verbally communicate with us, or even if they can verbally communicate, if they can't verbally communicate effectively with us, they can still communicate with us through their actions, through their behaviors, because that is a form of communication that everyone has. And what children with autism have learned is that their behaviors will get them attention, will get things moving. Let's get the show on the road. Speaking with this family, we learned that only time of day that they're really spending together with the child is during these walks, and they're spending a lot of their time on their phones, on their screen during the walk. They're not really giving the child attention. And when they notice that because they're not giving him attention, he would misbehave like that. When there was a intervention strategy implemented to give the child more attention during the walks and have the phones put away, all of that stepping on grass behavior and destroying neighbors' property behavior suddenly disappeared. Dawned on the family, like, oh, our child wanted our attention, wanted time with us, and they weren't getting it. That's why they're misbehaving, not because they just feel like misbehaving because they have nothing better to do. And I explained to families, one of my favorite quotes is that children do well when they can. Like when we understand them, what they are really seeking. Are they seeking attention? Are they seeking to avoid something that they don't want to do? Are they seeking praise for something that they are doing? No matter what their behaviors are, we have to get to the root of understanding them first, and then we can respond to it. And we have an extremely fantastically efficacious tool at our disposal, which is something called ABA therapy, behavior therapy, understanding what was the antecedent, what is triggering a certain behavior, and how we can address it, how we can give more attention to behaviors that we would like to see more of, and how we can try to extinguish the behaviors that we want to see less of by changing our own behaviors. So we have to, like the pillar of environmental exposure for a child, an environment where everyone is on their phone is detrimental to that child's development. So we change that environment, and all of a sudden their development and behaviors change as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent example. Thank you so much for that. And I agree that the ABA therapy for several of my patients has been invaluable and helping the parents truly understand, as well as the child better understand the situations and how to cope and regulate and become more resilient. And so the example you gave, yes, that was a child who may have been on the autism spectrum. However, we say that a lot. And what I find many parents say is they just misbehave and this is this, and labeling them. Some children even get labeled as bad or mischievous or all these other things. But the reality is children will seek attention, whether it's positive or negative. And we as parents and pediatricians and grandmothers, aunts, uncles have to realize that when you're seeing these negative behaviors, you need to step back and realize why I'm seeing them. And then going forward, because there's often a root reason. Most kids just don't wake up one day and decide to throw a chair in class or whatever might be the case, right?
Yeah, they're usually triggers that happen. There's something that happened before that to trigger that behavior, because we're generally neurotypical children on the spectrum all crave some social connection. No human being, even on the autism spectrum, can live like a hermit in an isolation and still be considered to be fully healthy and a functioning individual in society. Like we all crave it. It's just how we express our need for attention and how we communicate our unique personalities to the world that can cause trouble here and there.
Yes, definitely. Another aspect of children, on the spectrum is the difficulty with, transitions and things like that. And a lot of people don't understand it. So when they're around children who are on the spectrum, and they may or may not know, they don't understand why little Johnny won't go with them, or why little Johnny has a tantrum when they get left with someone to babysit them. And for a lot of these parents, they can't find a babysitter because the kid is no. And so how can you maybe better explain to people or help them to understand how they should approach these children and their desire for transitions and notification prior to these transitions?
I love this question. This question is incredible. Okay. I tell parents, like, hey guys, imagine you are in the middle of watching a movie, or you're on your phone and you're trying to read a news article or something like that, and someone just comes up and snatches your phone out of your hand or shuts the power off. You would be mad. You would have an emotional reaction right then and there, even as an adult. This is exactly what happens to children when they don't understand what your plans are for the day necessarily. They have their own plans for the day. So if they're engaged in an activity, they're doing something that they like, they're in the park, they're swinging, and you say, all right, time to go home. We're done with this. They're going to react the same way you would have reacted when someone just snatches things away from you. They had no time to prepare. They had no opportunity to understand what would be expected of them at a certain point in time. This point becomes even more critical and acute for children with autism because the executive functioning is one of the areas that's impaired in autism. So their ability to regulate their impulses and their desires and just self-control in general is more affected in the frontal cortex. So for them, it's even more challenging to be able to transition from doing one thing and stopping what they're doing and moving on to the next activity without a clear understanding as to the timelines of when things will happen or how they'll look like when they're happening. They like things to be organized and structured and rigid. Speaking in generalities, not all children with autism are the same. Of course, it's a spectrum. But when they have those clear and rigid outlines of what's expected of them and timers that let them know, okay, after this period of time, we're going to move on to the next thing, it's less of a shock. You get less likelihood of having a transitional outburst and tantrum because of transitions.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for that example, because I see so many of my patients, the parents just don't get it. And then some haven't been diagnosed, right? They just may be a little bit of sensory discomfort, things like that. But these are children who may later on get a full diagnosis or just have difficulty with transitions. And I tell parents, when you are looking at helping a child learn how to be a little bit more resilient, you have to give them those tools. So as you prepare them for some of these things, and then you could even prepare them sometimes. Today, I know I told you we were going to go to the park, but we're not going to be able to go to the park today. But having that conversation versus just showing up at the zoo when they thought they were going to the park, but actually really engaging your children in dialogue, no matter how young they are. Of course, if they're 1 year old, that's a little bit different. But if they're around 3 years old, they often are understanding what you're saying, and it can really help you so that when you get to the place, they're not surprised. I tell people, don't surprise little kids. They don't like being surprised.
Because you'll be
Unless it's a
surprised by
gift.
how they react.
Exactly. Don't just drop them off and then you go somewhere, right? You really need to build up the situation so that they understand. I love that analogy. The same way you would want somebody to say, hey, do you mind getting off your phone versus just taking your phone or taking your newspaper or whatever. Turn it off your movie.
Go try that with a teenager out there in the streets who's on their phone. See how they react.
Oh, definitely not doing that. I don't know how that will end very well. This podcast is Raising Resilient Minds. So when you think of the word resiliency, what does it make you think of?
Resiliency makes me think of a world that doesn't only embrace safetyism. This is a world where, from the parenting standpoint, that the world is filled with stress and anxiety. And if you want to meet a person who has no problems, no troubles, no negative thoughts whatsoever, you're going to have to visit a graveyard, because every living soul on this planet has their own preoccupations, challenges, and worries and difficulties that they're dealing with, which we may have no idea about. The way to have a resilient individual is to allow them to face those challenges and overcome them with enough support, but on their own and not doing things for a person. Well, how does the saying go? So if you give a man a fish or woman,
right,
they'll have a fish for a day, but if you teach them to fish, they can have fish for life. The same, that's what I feel about resiliency. Our job as parents and caregivers to teach kids, even when we don't really believe that they'll be able to do it on their own right away, to still be brave, step up, and teach them resiliency at every opportunity that we can, to teach them how to resolve those emotions and the responses to challenges that life will throw their way. Basically to make someone closer and closer to those ideals of stoicism. Of what happens to you is not under your control, but the way you respond to what happens to you is 100% under your control.
Yes, Dennis, thank you for that. I have a patient who is actually a quadriplegic, has very minimal, let's just say has cerebral palsy in all limbs, I should say. It's very interesting because when I first met her, the parents just carry her in and put her on the table. And I'm like, okay. And she will actually, over time, has built increased strength just because they don't always just leave her in a wheelchair. They have her kind of utilize a little bit of more of her musculature. And what's really cool is that she now has like a speaking device and things like that, which helps her. But one of the easiest things that has helped me is they just taught her to increase a little bit of her strength in her hands, right? So they've been working on that for years. And so now she can give me a thumbs up, side, and a little, like you can tell it's going down if she has pain, if she isn't feeling well. And so it's just incredible, that one little thing that they were able to teach her, because they
Wow.
never felt like she couldn't do things. And
Wow.
I love to see how we communicate with her. We talk to her because she's understanding us and she's smiling and she's laughing. Whereas other people would see her and think she's not there. And we fail to realize just because something isn't what we expect on the outside doesn't mean it's not this beautiful thing inside. And so we have to make sure that when we see children who have special needs, that we interact with them and we speak to them and we give them that opportunity to develop that increased resiliency, because you just never know what they're capable of. And the brain continues to make all these connections and networks and things like that. And I've just been amazed to see how I thought she wouldn't be able to do any of those things. And just over the years, just continues to add on to talents and things that she's able to do. It's very, very, very rewarding as a pediatrician to see that resiliency in that child. And I'm sure you probably have lots of stories and things like that of children yourself. If you want to share any, that would be great.
Oh, I feel exactly the same way you feel. I always tell families that your biggest limiting potential for your child is what you believe that they'll be able to accomplish, because they'll never exceed beyond that. Like, I host an entire annual banquet for children with special needs every year here on Staten Island, honoring the growth mindset. So whatever small progress a child has made over the past 12 months, even if the outside world doesn't deem it to be like worthy of a trophy because they didn't win a football game or whatever, I give them all medals and certificates of accomplishment for being an eloquent elocutionist with their speech, or a masterful maestro for their music skills. Because if you celebrate every small step along a journey, you will encourage that child to continue making progress and show them that we don't really see you as being limited in anything you're going to do. You're only going to limit yourself by what you want to accomplish. And we're going to have faith and hope in you in being able to reach amazing heights. We're not going to be the limiting factor on you.
Yes.
Some of the stories that I hear from families, one in particular is that they say, we know that, and this happens, I'm sure you've heard this happen in your office very often. So we see that our child is able to sit calmly while they're in school and point to request things while they're in school. But at home, we're having a much more difficult time, so that when we know that they need something, rather than waiting for them to point to it or ask us for it, we try to read their mind and just hand them things without seeing the child struggle. But what the parents are missing is that if the child is able to do this in school, they're very capable of doing it at home as well. And I have parents really repeat an affirmation and a mantra to themselves of saying this. I write them a prescription. This is what you're going to say at home. I will not do things for Timmy that I know he can do for himself. Because when we're in a rush and we need to get things done, which is understandable as parents, sometimes we are in a rush, especially in today's modern world. Things are much faster than they used to be. We don't really necessarily always have the patience or the time or adequate sleep, which is very true for me right now, to be able to patiently approach our children. But if we remind ourselves that if I give my child the opportunity to show me exactly all the skills that they have learned and that they're able to do, I won't be a hindrance or a detriment to them making further progress.
Exactly. No, and it's so real. It's easy to just do things for people. But imagine if someone had done everything for you. That's why we see so many of our teenagers who can't get a job, who don't know how to, they're like, I don't have any skills. I don't even know how to wash my clothes. I don't know how to cook. I don't even know how to sweep. And it's at some point we have to actually instill skills, whether you are neurotypical or neurodivergent, it doesn't matter. These are still skills.
Resiliency.
Exactly, that resiliency. And it's so important that we don't forget about that. And I love the banquet that you have, because I live in Oklahoma, and it's really big into sports. And you see so many children who maybe can't play a sport for whatever reason. And it's almost as if they're put on the back burner in the household, but they're still making so many wins and so many gains in so many other aspects of their lives. And so it's really important that we realize that is very important and to be celebrated, the little things. And it's not just grades, it's little things. Like, I have a child who he's diagnosed, who's on the autism spectrum, and he now is just speaking more. And so we make a huge deal about it in the office. Tell me something else. But man, you're just going to talk our little head off, whatever. And he's so excited. And he actually has difficulty with how his words come out. And so half the time we can't always understand him, but we try to figure out as much as we can. And then the mom helps us and we just continue to have that dialogue. And he just loves coming into our office now because he knows that this is a group of people who are going to celebrate my little things, right? The fact that I'm able to communicate and use a few more words. And so it can be as small as that, but it's helping that child to become more resilient and to work harder, to be able to use his words or even his speaking device if he needs to use that. And so it's important that we celebrate the small wins. And I have an All-American track athlete in my household. But I also have a daughter who's a musician and likes to dance, right? And she's not this huge ballerina or anything like that, but I'm going to celebrate every win and everything that happens just as much as I celebrate that All-American track runner.
You're so blessed. This is beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So in summary, do you have an online practice as well, or just is everything in Staten Island? I forgot that.
I have a physical location, so everything is in person.
Got you. So if people want to connect with you or visit your podcast, tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So if you go on YouTube and you type in my last name, Barayev Pediatrics, my YouTube channel will show up, which also is broadcast as a podcast. It's called Autism Demystified. Or families can visit my website at B as in Barayev, and then dpc.com. And that has links to all of my social media as well as YouTube channel and podcasts.
Awesome. Thank you. So would you like to leave us with any closing words?
Closing words. I first of all want to thank you for hosting this show about resilience and how critically important it is, not only for children, even for adults. And my closing words is to the caregivers and to parents and to even myself. I had to step back at times when working with children who have special needs and with autism as well. It's amazing how much a child will surprise you if you give them the opportunity to show their skills independently. I recently had a family who said that his child was able to participate in a hearing screen, like with headphones and pure tone audiometry. And I said, you know what? Let's give it a shot. The old Dr. Vlad may have just been said, okay, fine, we'll leave you alone. We won't put you through the hassle of having to try this. But the new Dr. Vlad said, no, we're going to try it. We're going to see if you're game for it. And you know what? The mother was shocked. This is an 11-year-old child. For the first time ever, was able to participate in a hearing assessment. And he did great, actually. He did really well with it. So the rule is to always try. They will surprise you, and to let them do it on their own. Because otherwise, what ends up happening is, imagine if every single person, when they first learned to walk and they fell down that first time, if they never got a chance to get up and try to walk again, none of us will be walking today. Just remember that. Your child is doing these things. They're doing some things for the first time, maybe the second and third time. Let them keep trying. They will make progress as long as we believe in them.
Definitely. And that's the most important thing, is we have to believe in them, and believing in them is allowing them to continue no matter how many times it doesn't seem to work out. And when you have a child who has special needs, there are many times that it may not seem like it's going to work out, but eventually it probably will. And it may not work out the way you envisioned it, but it's going to work out the way it's supposed to be. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm Dr. Jihan. You can find me at drjihan.com. And this is Raising Resilient Minds podcast. Take care.